so abortion free and legal all 9 months, legal without restriction. So does this mean up until, is there any point where?
Yeah, so I think it's important to define the term abortion, which would be deliberate termination of pregnancy.
Okay.
I think in some cases there can obviously be terminations of pregnancy that don't result in the death of the fetus. And I would opt for that post 24 weeks.
Oh, so it's a bait question. What a disingenuous bait question.
I don't think it's disingenuous.
So let me make sure that I steelman this properly. I just want to steelman it.
I guess it's your turn. Go ahead.
I just want to steelman.
Sure.
So it is the case that you're against all abortions after 24 weeks if they end the life of the child.
No. I think in the case, obviously, to preserve the life of the pregnant person as well as in severe fetal abnormality would be my exceptions.
Okay, so you have exceptions to it, but generally. So
Yes.
the vast majority of abortions would be immoral after 24 weeks.
Again, I don't think abortion just means lethal outcome. If we are talking about lethal outcome, I just don't see the practicality in it.
Yeah, I get it. So you're saying that after the 24-week mark, if you're going to have an abortion because you whatever arbitrary reason you come up with that, and you want it to end up in the termination of the child and the child's inside you, you're not allowed to do that.
That would be murder. I would classify that as
So
murder.
then it's just a bait question. So you don't actually think that there should be so you're just making a semantic distinction. You're saying this works on TikTok all the time too, right? Just for you, the audience. Yeah, go ahead.
I will give you some credence there that I do think that often that phrasing of free and legal 9 months can be very baiting because of how people view the term abortion, which is why I've also included without restriction. And now on my prompts, I just do pro-abortion.
Yeah, right, because you do want restrictions.
No.
Yeah, right. But only because the semantic distinction is something other than what people associate with abortion.
Like Colorado doesn't have any legislation regarding abortion. And that's what I want. I don't want legislation regarding abortion.
None?
Colorado has none. So Canada doesn't have any. I believe Washington is another state.
So what happens in Colorado if you do terminate the pregnancy at 8 months?
Then it would just result in a live birth, either a hysterotomy abortion, which is similar to a cesarean, or an induction abortion.
6 months?
30 weeks, same thing. Again, it would depend specifically on the obviously, I had a friend when we were in our 20s, like I told you earlier, I live in Montana, and any kind of abortion past 24 weeks is illegal. So she had to travel to Colorado because her son had a severe fetal abnormality and he would not survive birth.
Yeah, I get that. But if there is no problems with the pregnancy, right, and there's no direct harm or threat to the mother's the mother's health, what happens if you want to terminate the pregnancy at 6 months?
Then it would just result in an induction or a cesarean.
But at 6 months, that could easily lead to the child's death.
It could, just like birth could.
So
premature birth could.
So wouldn't you want there to be legislation against that?
No.
Yeah, but the chances are significantly higher.
Can you tell me, because this is always kind of where I get really frustrated with people who are pro-life, is kind of explaining to me the landscape of someone who has waited 30 weeks and then wants an abortion, no longer to be pregnant for any reason.
Yeah. Okay, what's the question?
Can you explain the landscape? Because I feel like a lot of pro-lifers just kind of assume that there are people out there who are 30 weeks, just wake up not feeling the pregnancy anymore. Might as well just go get it taken care of. If
you don't think there's a problem there, then why would you be adverse to legislation? Just enforcing that you can't do X?
Because the legislation creates complications within a very complex medical condition, which we can see primarily in Texas, especially in Idaho, to where, how sick do you need to be? How much in harm's way do you need to be before you can actually get access to an abortion or to some kind of termination of pregnancy?
Okay, but legislation can also offer clarity, right?
It doesn't.
Yeah, it can offer clarity.
It doesn't.
It can't or it does not?
It
Descriptive or
can't.
prescriptive?
I don't see any
Then why have
effective
laws?
legislation.
Why do we have laws against murder?
I think there can be instances or certain contexts where it can be specific. If you want me to relate that to abortion, like specifically if we look at Texas has regulations regarding exceptions for life of the mother as well as health of the mother. But this has created complications because the Texas legislature won't give specifics or even conditions which would qualify under the exception. They were sued and asked to do so, and the Supreme Court said they didn't have to.
Yeah, right. So clarity is your issue, but you agree with me?
It's not clarity, no, because again, I just think pregnancy is so nuanced and it's so complex that legislation cannot effectively do it. If we want to talk about
murder is also vastly complex, extremely nuanced. The justifications vary from literally municipality to municipality.
Sure.
So
but again, I think the ultimate authority and autonomy is with someone who is a medical professional and understands the health history of their patient, as well as the own patient's testimony of what's happening.
Well, it's not going to be up to them. It's going to be up to the person actually having the abortion, right?
What do you mean? Well,
it's not up to the medical professional is not making a prescription. They're just executing the procedure.
In some capacities, they are making prescriptions in terms of this is what these are where your vitals at. This is what this can lead to. These are the outcomes that they want to prevent.
Those are descriptors.
This is what we're going to do.
Those are descriptive, not prescriptive.
Okay. In terms of what you ought to do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, what's your question?
So what you ought to do is going to be determined by the autonomy of the mother.
Not necessarily.
Then what's it going to be determined by?
I would say the pragmatics of the situation.
So who gets to make that decision?
I think it can be a cohesive discussion, but the doctor would have some authority, just like the doctor has authority in terms of, I go in and I want my leg amputated. There's going to be specific context to where the doctor's not going to do it. I
don't disagree with that in a matter prescribed by law. But you're saying you don't want.
I don't think that is prescribed by law.
Yeah, but it is. You can't just cut off a person's foot because they want you to. That would be against the Hippocratic Oath.
Well, that Hippocratic Oath and law are two different things.
No, that is law. If you make an oath, that is law. And it is legally binding.
Not.
Yes, it is.
No, are we talking about civil law or are we talking about legislative?
Law. Yeah, it's civil law.
Civil law.
And by the way, there are actually specificities too within the medical market of doctor discretion not being they can't, for instance, say, no, we're not going to treat you for the symptoms that you're complaining about. They still have to treat you, right? And I'm sure that
but they can exclude
different
some aspects of treatment.
Sure, I'm not even disputing that. But in this case, you're asking for no legislation.
No legislation, no state legislation, no federal legislation.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, right. So if you're saying no federal legislation, no state legislation, then the doctor you can obviously have a doctor who's just I'll just do whatever the person's asking me to do.
Well, that's not happening.
Well, yeah, because it's legislated.
It's not. I gave you the example.
Yeah, I'm curious about this. Can you pull it up, Brian?
I gave you the example.
Does Colorado have any abortion law whatsoever? Can you pull that up for me?
Yeah, Blake, can you find us
Canada as well? I'm pretty sure Washington too.
No abortion law?
No abortion law. And they actually had a lower abortion rate up until, I want to say, 2023.
So it says here, Colorado, at least from the AI, one of the most abortion-friendly states in the United States. It's legal in Colorado, all stages of pregnancy.
Constitutional protection. In 2022, Colorado voters approved Prop 79, enshrined the right to abortion in the state constitution, so there is legislation on abortion. That's incorrect. So there's definitely legislation in Colorado. What is there in Canada?
Constitutional protections.
Yeah, that would definitely be the law of the land would be the Constitution.
Maybe I can be more specific then in terms of legislation against abortion. Because we did just read.
So you want
correct?
legislation for abortion?
1 second. We did just read that the first line was abortion is legal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes.
But it's legal because it's enshrined in the law.
Because it's constitutionally protected.
Yeah.
Right. So I would be against legislative in terms of like making laws against it. I'm sorry if I wasn't specific on that.
Okay, so it's just laws against it.
Correct.
Okay, so what if the termination of the or if the doctor was willing to perform the abortion in such a way where it terminated the fetus, even at 8 months?
Okay.
Would you be for a law against that?
No.
No. Would that be murder?
Yes.
But no punishment?
Correct.
How is that morally consistent? That's like the most monstrous thing I've ever
So
heard.
I think this is where like a utilitarian position would come into, is that when we look at abortion post 21 weeks, even in states that have all legal protections towards abortion, it's 1% of abortions. And then when we look at that 1% even further, it's prior to 28 weeks. So post 28 weeks, I think a lot of pro-lifers just kind of make like up these ideas that people want to come in and just have lethal terminations for no reason.
This is
They've
all
sustained-
descriptive. You're just talking.
Right,
yeah.
if I can finish.
Yeah, but this is descriptive. I'm asking about prescriptive.
Right, so I'm getting there. So what I'm saying is that this is a non-existent, at worst, and rare event at best. And in terms of the deaths of fetuses within this criteria, that is going to be less than the deaths of pregnant people who are denied abortions who are medically necessary. And so which one would I rather have? I would rather have more people live, which would be the pregnant people.
Okay, so I'm still really confused here, but maybe you can give me some
Sure.
some clarity. You are aware that in Russia, abortion was also legal under first wave feminism going into communism, right?
What time period?
Would you like the exact dates?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that this was roughly, hang on, let me pull it up. I got it in my notes here. USSR was the first country to make abortion fully legal, up to term, and paid for in state hospitals. Within 10 years of implementing that policy, they had 3 abortions for every 1 live birth, and they had to outlaw abortion again.
Again, what time frame?
I'm trying to pull the dates up here.
Sure.
Yeah. Hang on. I didn't write the date down for that.
I'm just wondering, essentially, against like the conditions
Looks
of
like around 1920.
1920.
Yeah, later restricted then banned in 36 because of this
So-
problem. So it was 1920 through 36, right around roughly the same exact time as what other amendment was 1920? Do you know? Amendment in the United States, 1920.
The right to vote.
Yeah. So
I'm
right
sorry. Are
around.
you saying that's correlated? Somehow?
No. I just think it's interesting that the right to vote and feminism, because in the 20s it was roaring, and same thing in Russia, but they had 3 abortions for every 1 live birth they had outlawed. Literally had outlawed. They didn't
I mean, that
reignite
was a time where Russia was a pretty war-torn country, wasn't it? Because Stalin was overthrowing the monarch regime and the Bolsheviks.
Yeah, they definitely needed to have human beings. They knew that, but that was
Sure.
the problem is that if you have 3 to 1 on the live births, you can't sustain the nation. So when they reintroduced it in 56, it looks like that's the time period that they re-legalized it, was in 56, had significant regulations on it to prevent that from happening. So hang on, so I'm just saying, the reason I bring this up
Okay.
is because you claim, well, descriptively, this isn't happening now. Okay, but descriptively, it was happening when it was allowed without laws against it. So I have actual evidence.
Right.
of
So
that.
again, obviously this can be conditional outcomes depending on certain things. Do you think that the sooner you have an abortion, the better?
I mean, I don't see how, like, from my specific worldview, from
Yeah.
the secular worldview, because I always think abortion's wrong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that would be one of my argumentations, is that if you were having essentially a society to where medical access wasn't available, or it was at a high cost, then this could delay obviously your opportunity to get an abortion, which may cause it in later stages of pregnancy.
Yeah, that's rare.
What do you mean?
That in later stages of pregnancy, you're going to have abortions, right? Isn't that what you said?
No, it is rare because access is available. So I'm saying if it's happening later in pregnancy, it's most likely because there are times where access is not available.
Yeah, okay, so from your view, you're just saying, like, because you don't see a distinction, right? You just think life begins in some arbitrary point, like 24 weeks or something, tied in with consciousness or something silly, right?
Something silly.
Well, it is silly because you can't define consciousness. It's not a definable thing.
I mean, do you think you have a subjective experience?
Sure, but that's
What
not
is that
defining.
subjective experience
That's not
made of?
defining consciousness.
What is that subjective experience made of?
I have no idea. Do you? What's it made of?
I think it's made of a lot of different components of things, but the fact that you recognize that it exists.
Doesn't define what it is.
And what do you mean? What kind of definition do you
Well,
want?
tell me what consciousness is. The ability to have experiences?
Yeah.
So, are you saying that you have no experiences when you're unconscious?
Well, I think there's other aspects of experience that not just only go into
So you are
terms
having
of,
experiences, even when you're unconscious?
well, I don't think consciousness and being conscious are necessarily the same thing.
They're not?
No, like I wouldn't say that like someone who is sleeping doesn't have consciousness, even though
but
they're
you don't
unconscious.
believe that when you're
I'm
sleeping,
sorry,
you're
could
completely
we-
unconscious.
I'm sorry? What?
You said earlier you don't believe when you're sleeping, you're completely unconscious. When we're talking about grape.
You're completely unconscious?
Yeah, you said you didn't believe that you're completely unconscious when you sleep.
You are unconscious. That was my main tenet, is that you're having sex with someone who's unconscious.
Okay, so then if you're not unconscious, if you are unconscious when you're asleep, are you experiencing things when you sleep?
Yes, you can still experience stimuli.
Then how could you be unconscious?
Because of other qualia, sensation, emotions. I mean, your ability to dream.
If consciousness then is defined as one
Do you
who
think
has
babies-
hang on.
Oh, sorry.
If consciousness is expressed as one who has experiences. Hang on.
I'm sorry. Can we get
no,
back to?
No, we can't. I just
well,
want to
I feel
make
like
sure.
we pivoted from.
No, we really didn't pivot. You
we
pivoted
did,
it here.
No. You said arbitrarily at 24 weeks. That's a different subject than what we were talking about.
Yeah,
We
but
can-
I just
we can
want to
table that, but
Can
I
we
wanna
just
get
finish
back to
this
the
real quick?
20
It'll only take 1 second.
I'm fine.
Consciousness, one who has experiences is conscious. If you're having experience when you're unconscious, then you can't be then you must have consciousness even when you're unconscious, right?
Yes, there are aspects that you can have consciousness when you are unconscious. I
So
don't
are
think
you
that
actually
those are
unconscious?
synonyms. Yes, because I think unconscious and consciousness are different.
What?
Like,
What's different? I have no consciousness or I do?
what is being conscious to you?
I don't, well, it's not a thing, again, that's definable, really.
I'm just in terms of, so you when your wife is sleeping, that's as good as she's awake
What do you mean?
in terms of conscious and unconscious
Yeah, I think that she still has consciousness.
when she's sleeping,
Yes.
even though she's unconscious.
Right. Well,
we
no, she's not.
agree.
No, she's
Then we
not. I don't
agree.
think she's unconscious. I think she's knocked out.
What's the difference?
Well, this is the thing about consciousness. Like I said, it's not definable. I think therefore I am is the best we can come up with.
but we agree
On what?
that when you're sleeping, you're still have consciousness.
I agree with
even
that.
though you're not
From your worldview,
conscious.
yeah, from my worldview, that makes sense. From your worldview, that
Why
makes no
does that
sense.
make sense from your worldview?
Because you're the one who's making the determination as to when life begins. It's 24 weeks because of consciousness.
What do we mean by life?
Consciousness.
What do you mean by life?
Doesn't. I'm doing an internal critique. Then you can do your internal
It does,
critique.
because we do, like, obviously there's different there's different terms when we talk about, like, the mode of life. Like, I'm sure you would recognize that cellular division and metabolic life is very different than someone having a subjective
Yeah,
experience.
I agree. It's human life. You agree it's human life.
Yes.
Great. There's no disagreement there.
Right.
What I'm saying, that's before 24 weeks.
But it is different than someone having a conscious experience.
To you.
Or a subjective
Yeah,
experience.
to you, it's
Why is that not different
because for you, that's the thing you value, not the life itself.
Well, yeah, without a subjective experience, there's no society, right?
Right, but the problem is that you can't demonstrate there's no subjective experience before 24 weeks. So that's one. And two, even if you could say there's no subjective experience before 24 weeks, consciousness itself is the one thing that human beings really don't understand very well.
Okay.
We just really don't understand it at all. So it's not easy to define. We don't know why we have it. It makes no real sense, right? It's a thing not well understood. So the reason I point out that it's arbitrary is because it's kind of impossible to prove that there's no subjective experience before 24 weeks in a fetus. It's just like impossible to prove that.
I mean, I agree. I guess it's in kind of I classify it as like the same as like puberty. Like obviously there are certain metrics that you hit when you have reached puberty, but when does someone like go through puberty or experience puberty or how long does puberty take is going to be different. So sure,
Yeah, it's an
depending
arbitrary
on
metric. Yeah.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, so that was my whole point. Is like you
okay.
came up with a 24-week arbitrary metric.
I think in some instances, like there are going to be some instances where yes, things are arbitrary. It's just you just have to draw a line somewhere.
Okay, so we'll table that. We know it's
Okay.
arbitrary. I'm glad that we got the semantics taken care of so that we understand.
No, I'm sorry. It
didn't
seem like we agreed. I'm glad we do.
And then moving forward, well, we kind of do, but moving forward from there, right? I would still like to know why it is on the legislation end. And then we can just move the topic because there's a bunch of them I want to get to, and we only have so much time.
Sure.
But I just
I know
want to
we did spend a
know
lot on the
when it
force
comes
theory.
when it comes to legislation, they did not legislate there, and it did actually descriptively lead to an increase in the number of abortions that happened. There was no regulation on it, and it was a 3-to-1 against live births. That's obviously very unhealthy for everybody. That's not good, right?
So-
Since I have the descriptive
Sorry.
claim that already happened when there was no legislation, what would be your demonstration here? Like you see
I don't
in
think
Colorado.
you've established like a causal that it.
Well, without abortions, there wouldn't have been abortions. Yeah, that's pretty causal.
Well, in terms of like what is the reason that people are terminating pregnancy? So let me put
Who
it.
cares why they're terminated?
I think that really is a huge assessment that we have to make in terms of if we want abortion to reduce. So if you and I are on the same goal that we want to reduce abortions,
And having legislation against abortion does that.
no, I would just say it just limits access to safe abortions. If we're going to actually pragmatically reduce abortion, I would say that we would want to prevent unwanted pregnancy, which would be through comprehensive sex health education, which would be through long-acting reversible contraceptives. So that would be one way to prevent it. If we're going to, when people get pregnant, give them more options to where they want to or feel like they have the capability to take care of another child, that would be thing like access to health care, access to paid parental leave, access to subsidized daycare. Those things would actually meaningfully reduce abortion.
So with legislation.
Huh?
So with legislation.
It doesn't.
It does. And you actually conceded to this in the first statement you made. So here's what you said. You said it limits your access to safe abortions. Do you think that if abortions are unsafe, more or less people will have them?
If abortions are unsafe, more or less people will have them.
More or less women will have them if they're unsafe.
I think I don't. It's hard to gauge if it would be more or less because I think someone
Really?
who has an abortion, I would say less women would have an abortion.
Less, yeah.
Yeah.
So then necessarily legislating against abortions equals less abortions.
It just equals,
Less abortions.
in some aspects, yes, and in others, no.
No,
'cause-
in all aspects, yes. Because if there's one less abortion than there was yesterday, and there would ordinarily have been one more abortion today if that would not have happened had you not legislated yesterday, then there is less abortion.
Okay,
Correct?
sure.
Yeah, so then legislating
I mean,
does...
it would really depend because I think like obviously in Texas, there has been restrictions on abortion, and we just see people flee to other states.
Where abortion's legal.
And then also in Texas as well, I would argue that like with the heartbeat bill, when it was 6 weeks, because people had such a short window to decide if they would want an abortion or have a child, that they erred on the side of caution and had an abortion.
Yeah, but
so the legislation in fact increased abortions, because if people would have had more time.
But what if there was no heartbeat bill
They
and it
would
was
have
just
decided to actually carry the child to term.
Well, here's my refutation of both those arguments. The first is, all that would do is signify to me that you put legislation at conception and don't give people an opportunity.
Well, you're not pregnant at conception.
Yeah, you can still make the legislation at conception.
So then would IUDs be illegal?
Well, no, just the conception of the pregnancy, whatever that is, right? Whatever you want to term that.
Conception is different from...
Okay, fine. Whatever the semantic distinction is, I'm just saying.
It's not a semantic distinction.
Okay. Were you confused about what I said?
Yes.
Okay. When does a woman get pregnant?
Implantation.
Okay. So whenever that is, whenever a woman gets pregnant, maybe I misspoke. Whenever a woman gets pregnant, okay, you could just legislate right then and there. That's when life begins. You're not allowed to have an abortion. So you can legislate against abortion effectively before the 6-week marker. You could just say, nope, not allowed, period.
Okay.
Right? So that would significantly limit those, because you say people are just panicking because they have a narrower window. I'm saying take the window out, and then they won't panic. You just can't do it. So then you say, well, they flee to other states where abortion is legal. Okay, fair enough. So then if you made abortion illegal in those states, abortion would drastically reduce as well, necessarily.
Sure.
Yeah, so in both cases, it seems like we can greatly reduce abortion regardless of making it criminal. In fact, it's going to reduce.
I would say that having a more pragmatic approach would be, number one, more effective, because we would see better outcomes. And again, you just really lose me on regulating a woman's autonomy. I think if we're going to give anyone the choice to determine family planning, to determine health risks, to determine mental health, then it would be the person who's carrying the pregnancy.
I literally made the argument earlier that you care about the woman's autonomy, and you said no, the doctor also, he has the authority and say and this and that.
Wait, that was a different delineation we're talking about in terms of the procedure that you're having.
Which is an abortion. There's no different delineation.
There's different abortion procedures. So I thought that's what we were talking about, because obviously if you're in the third trimester, there are different methods that you can enact in order to terminate the pregnancy. So when it came to that method, yes, obviously the doctor can have the authority on that. But when it came to the decision, yes, that is the patient.
Yeah. Why shouldn't we be allowed to limit women's autonomy? Just like we limit men's autonomy by sending them off to war?
I just don't see the justification for it.
I don't see the justification for sending men off to war, but it is necessary.
We agree on that.
But it is necessary.
I disagree. I don't think it's necessary.
You don't?
No.
Okay, got it. So then if your nation was invaded and men didn't want to fight, your nation gets taken over. That's that, right? Yeah. So basically there's no duty for men to in any way fight in a compelled way.
I mean, having a duty is different than being forced to do something. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I would think if this is central to your society, and then yeah, people would step up and want to do it. If they don't,
because they're scared.
Okay.
Yeah, they're scared. I mean, they're scared, right? But I mean, you do realize that many nations, they have compelled service.
I think again, like when we go back to this idea of like engaging in war, I think we need to have a critique on society in general.
Well, we don't even need to do that. I'll just grant for you.
I think we do.
Well, I'm granting it for you. I'm just going to grant for you. Okay, you're right. There should be no compelled service. That still doesn't actually answer, though, why autonomy is the thing in which we should not limit autonomy for people. Why not?
I think there can be instances where we limit autonomy, but I just don't see a reason for abortion.
Well, I think you do. You've already expressed multiple times that there would be...
How is it ethical to force someone to sustain pregnancy?
After 6 months?
Yeah.
So what if it's going to kill the baby?
Okay. I don't think that they have an obligation to give for them to have their body used as life support.
So then at 9 months, they can kill their baby?
Again, we would just terminate the connection. So their labor would
Okay.
just be induced.
You
And
do, yeah,
the
yeah.
purpose of abortion is centered around pregnancy.
Yeah.
So if you want pregnancy to end, there's a lot of different ways we can do that.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's no necessity in killing the fetus once you're. What do you mean?
Like, for instance, you claim that the mom has bodily autonomy, right? And that shouldn't be violated. And the bodily autonomy is that the baby needs to use her body, right?
Okay.
So what happens if the baby is born and the mom doesn't want to feed the baby?
Well,
Babies are fed with breast milk, right?
Sure. So I think we need to decide what are individual responsibilities and what societal responsibilities.
No, it's about autonomy, I thought.
I haven't even finished. So when we talk about societal responsibilities, obviously, if a parent doesn't want to take care of their child, then they would become a ward of the state. And then the state would take on those responsibilities of caring for the child.
I don't understand. Why can't the mom just choose to not feed the baby until the baby expires?
What do you mean? Is she taking on the parental role?
Yeah, well, she had the baby. Okay, she had it.
Okay.
Let's say she had it at her prom. She was like,
She had it at her prom?
yeah, she was outside. She had a prom night dumpster baby, as the Family Guy would reference
terrible.
it. Okay. She had a prom night dumpster baby. And so anyway, she has the baby.
Okay.
This is important. It's actually an important distinction. So anyway, she has the baby.
To be
and then
into
she
the
just,
dumpster is an important distinction.
she doesn't want to feed it. She just doesn't want to because it's her body and it's her autonomy. So she just lets it die.
So, if once the baby is born,
Yeah.
as a society, obviously the care for the child needs to be determined.
Yeah.
So at that point, the mother can either claim the parental responsibility, which comes with all the obligations of obviously feeding the child, or if they don't claim it, then obviously that baby would be a ward of the state. So now the mother is in possession of a baby that's not hers. So I think in order to avoid kidnapping charges or harms towards a ward of the state, she needs to turn it over to the state.
So she has a duty to turn the baby over to the state.
Correct, because she's in possession of a ward of the state. So it's essentially almost a kidnapping charge.
Okay. So I want to make sure I get this right. So the mother, if she says this baby is mine, then she has the obligation to breastfeed it, right?
I mean, I would say breastfeeding would be a reasonable obligation, but why is there not formula?
Well, because formula is extremely unhealthy for babies.
Well, I mean, formula is what has saved the lives of babies.
Yes, when there's no, their mom's breast milk around, sure.
Right, a lot of women don't have the capacity to breastfeed.
No, most of them have the capacity to breastfeed.
They don't.
They do.
A lot of women struggle with
A lot,
breastfeeding.
yes. You could even
Yes.
make that claim because I would say a lot is like 1% of women would be a lot.
Do you think that if a mother chooses not to breastfeed, that she's harming her child?
Well, no, yeah. But what I'm looking at is.
Do you think that's to the degree of neglect? Or that she
I'm not
should
saying I'm not saying that it's neglectful. There could be reasons for it, including ignorance. There could be just like ignorance, things
Should
like
she
that.
retain custody
Even if she doesn't, under most cases, probably yes.
because she's feeding the baby through?
Yeah, but
another
I think
method?
I think that there should be a state mandatory propaganda campaign that mothers should breastfeed their children. Yes.
Should she receive legal consequences if she chooses not to?
If she had the capacity to do so and decided to give the kid poison instead, yeah, probably.